Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be taking a look at Run Like Crazy, Run Like Hell. It's an adaptation of a Jean-Patrick Manchette book by Jacques Tardi, and this is released from Fantagraphics as part of their, I guess, Tardi library. It doesn't say that on here, but they obviously have they're translating the majority of his work, it seems like. So I wanted to get a couple of his books in the Fanabook sale this year and see what I think of it. I've always liked his art. I've seen Tardi's art before and enjoyed the art. It immediately strikes me as some kind of combination between Rick Geary and Hugo Pratt. And Geary I don't like, Pratt I like, and the combination of the two I think is quite interesting. But I've never read any of the stories, and just from looking at the art, they always seemed like the kind of thing I maybe would like, fairly down to earth stuff, but they also always seem to have that like kind of European genre edge on them, so I was never like running out of my way to get the stuff. So I wanted to get it and try it, and this one I really quite enjoyed. I don't know, much about Jacques Tardi's career. I don't know if translations are normal, if he normally works with other writers. So I'll be exploring that. But this is a translation, adaptation, I should say, of a novel. So going into the book, I was kind of expecting a like slower paced book, but this is actually probably the best reference that I could make for this. Is it feels like a Guy Ritchie movie. So I could see why someone reading this book is like, oh my God, this is absurd. I have to illustrate this. So I'll go through and talk a little, kind of talk about the plot, I guess, mostly, and then point out as I go along, what's nice about the art. I don't think there's any moments in this book where Jacques Tardi is very like showing off. Like everything's to the story. There's never like the big impressive spread or anything like that, really. It's all very steady, dense pages. Each panel's perfectly composed, and then you have his really nice cartooning versus the more realistic treatment in the backgrounds. And that all comes together just for really effective storytelling and absorption in the work. But there's never like these moments where I can point out, look at this amazing, cool, crazy piece. It's kind of like old school comic strip artists like Alex Raymond and stuff like that, where you got to tell as much story as you can in a tight moment. So the paneling kind of has that, and the way the camera works always kind of feels like an older strip as well. There's not a lot of crazy camera work in this strip, which seems like fairly European to me as well. Like a lot of the more political dramas and stuff that I've read from the European scene have that more stage play type of camera work, and that seems to be consistent in this book. So anyways, we start out with it being introduced to Thompson. Thompson like willingly kills this guy, and we're introduced to him basically as a killer for hire character in the beginning, and then we get introduced to the two main characters, really. Michael Hartog, who is a very wealthy person who's inherited his wealth from family, and that's a subplot that comes back in, the suggestions is maybe there was some kind of untoward dealings there that led him to getting his family inheritance, but now he's a big architect and has a lot of money, and he's gotten into the soap business, I think they say. And then you have Julie Ballinger, who's basically the main character in this book that has been hired as a nanny to take care of Hartog's son. So you get here, she's being introduced kind of into his suite and into his life, going to get introduced to the kid. I immediately, before I even read the page, I noticed the Mondrian in the background, and I thought, oh, that's cool. And I really like that they picked a Mondrian that's not, the kind of ideal Mondrian that we all think about, where it's just the primary colors and the black and white. It's a little bit earlier in his career where he's still having curves and stuff in his paintings. So I like that. It's got kind of like suggests some type of connoisseurship. And then up here, when I started reading it, it does mention Mondrian abstracts, plural, on the wall, and you can see another one back here. That is one of the things that I didn't like so much about the book, is being a adaptation from literature. There's still a lot of prose hanging around In some other reviews that I've done recently, who knows what order they'll be posted, I've started to appreciate prose and comics more. Reading the Johnny Craig EC stuff, I feel like he did really cool things with the prose, but a lot of the prose in this book is kind of repetitious. So say, oh, you're entering this really nice room with like Mondrians on the wall, and then you see a nice room. Oh, here we actually have another Mondrian, the more typical Mondrian. So this character here, this Hartog character, is obviously just obsessed with Mondrian. Has a whole bunch of them around the house. Some other abstract sculptures and stuff too. But I could see all that in the background. I don't need the text to tell me that. So I feel like in this, and I don't know in the original language if maybe that's a problem with translation or something, but I feel like a lot of the captions could be taken out. They don't add a lot, or they could be reduced. A lot of the descriptive language could be reduced, and only like the interior, what's going on in the character's head, could be left behind. I think that's a major problem with comics being adapted from literature, as authors can get too caught up in the language that they loved from the original, and they won't see where they need to sacrifice that. So there's some of that in here, and I feel like it slows the story down a little bit. But there are also some interior things that need to be described, that do need to be described in the captions. The balance of how much is a little bit off in the book, I think. So here we are. We're getting introduced to Peter, who is Hartog's son, and Julie is to be his new nanny, basically. And he's an awful kid. Immediately, like, throws his toy at her nose and breaks the TV. So that's setting up the characters. Then you cycle back to Thompson, and you realize that Thompson has been hired to lead a team of people to kidnap Julie and Peter, and they're gonna basically use him as a ransom note against Hartog. That's what it seems like at this point in the story. Here we get Julie is, well, and by the way, while we're here, I would say my favorite part of Jacques Tardi's art, I think, is the way he deals with forestry and nature. Like, he's very willing to just kind of pile stuff up in a way that should almost flatten. Like, I'll point it out in other places, but like all the trees will be black and it should flatten it out. Doesn't do that here, but is still able to get such a sense of like place and texture. Same for when he's drawing cities as well. He really gets a sense of place and texture, and I think that's where it's like I most associate him with Pratt, or Kniff, somebody who's really about seeing the world. You get all these just kind of really different atmospheres that are represented in his art. But anyways, here Julie, they've typed a letter out trying to frame basically Julie for the kidnapping, and she's was refusing to do it, and then they force her. They say they're going to hurt the kid if she doesn't do it, so she does it. So at this point, she's barely had this job for any time, but now she's feeling responsible for taking care of this kid in this kidnapping situation. And at this point is where the book gets totally nuts, and I see why someone would want to illustrate it. And this is where I say it also becomes kind of like a Guy Ritchie movie, in that there's this over-the-top, almost comedically extreme violence throughout the book, as you get Julie here escaping with Peter and trying to basically get this kid back to his dad. So the crooks are kind of, not the professionals that they would seem to be, and they keep getting outwitted and killed by this nanny. And here again, you can see just the amazing compositions of Jacques Tardi, and also the very, very nice drawings of nature. They're very rough and direct. There's not a lot of messing about. There's a little bit of shake to the hand and everything, but it adds a lot of like vitality to the artwork. And then just the kind of wild placement, spotting of blacks all over the place, I think gives it a really absorbative quality to the backgrounds in his art. So at this point, we have this big chase scene, very cool. And I think something that works really well in this scene is that, as you can see in the book, Tardi doesn't have the most dynamic art style. Like, his camera is always pretty much level or just slightly above level like this. His characters are never massively foreshortened. It does have that stage play kind of feel to it. So when he goes into an action scene like this, where he's having a big crowd chase and something where, imagine this scene happening in a superhero comic, or especially imagine it happening in a manga where there's speed lines everywhere and foreshortening, and he has to get his dynamics in and his sense of tenseness and his sense of pacing and speed in some other way. And you can see, especially on this spread here, where he's gone into the grocery store, he's using all of this like rhythmic repetition. So like these bowls are falling here, and it could be that, what's obviously happening is she scooped like a stack of bowls off and they're falling. But it also gives like a futurist or cubist kind of look of something moving over time, and you get that. And then just the store itself being so packed full of these repetitious rhythmic elements, the knives creating all of this rhythmic sharpness coming down on them. That's like, there's all of these extra kind of, for me, almost auditory effects going on with the musicality of this page, even though there's not sound effects, there's not captions talking about any of this. And this is where you see like how good of a storyteller Tardi is, and it also makes you think, okay, well, you don't need as much of the captions. Now, some of the captions are helpful, but I think also maybe some storytelling could have covered it. But then you're talking about decompressing the book. So I think some of these come in and help compress the book. But like here, it's describing Thompson decided he couldn't hold this fire any longer. When he aimed, his stomach felt like it was being torn in half. Thompson got off 2 shots. So I think, like here, you just said you could take out the Thompson decided he couldn't hold this fire any longer and just put when he aimed, his stomach felt like it was being torn in half, or just his stomach felt like it was being torn in half. And then Thompson got off 2 shots. One went through Julie's arm, and then the other one, you don't have the caption. So I think you could have taken this away and had it fine. But there's also a really kind of, it makes it more awful when you see him just shoot this woman who just happened. She's a bystander, basically. The descriptiveness of one went through Julie's arm, and then this is so atrocious, I'm not even going to bother to make a caption of it. That actually has a lot of power to it. This is such a horrific thing, we can't even put it into words. So I think that's smart. That's a really smart move. So there's this bit of a juggling act with what's going on in the captions, where sometimes I feel it's used really well, and sometimes I think it's, it's not working for me. It seems unnecessary, and I want to skip it, but I don't. In this book, I don't know when I can skip reliably. But anyways, you can see through this sequence the intensity. And even on a shot like this, that again is not the most bombastic shot, it's just an absolutely like goddamn devastating shot of this bystander woman getting her head blown off. So you could see all throughout, and you can see how Julie is being, really clever, making basically a fake Molotov cocktail to take out these people. You get, again, the Guy Ritchie kind of violent comedy where this character has to strip off his pants and now he's running around in his underwear. So it's all really enjoyable. I think this could be a totally wild movie. You could totally see this movie about this badass, like Liam Neeson lady babysitter taking care of this kid, directed by Guy Ritchie. That would be fun. Here's another Guy Ritchie moment. The cops come in. You've still got this guy wearing his underwear here, getting shot to pieces. And I think the way Tardi draws like the blood, the clumpiness of it makes it extra kind of painful looking. And then just the brutality of like the shop owner here comes out and comes up to this character with his shotgun and just blows his head off to protect his, he's like helping the police take these guys out because this guy's shooting at the police. So the brutality of it all mixed with the absurdity of the guy being in his underwear, again, I think there's a certain type of movie that would be really, really interesting that to be seen with this story. Then here you get a deeper dive into a character, Fuentes, who's mentioned earlier in the book kind of as the bad guy, but you start to find out that maybe Hartog's the bad guy all along, and Hartog used to be the partner to this character here. Hartog seemed to be the more business end, and Fuentes was the more the creative end. So you see this weird labyrinth kind of outsider art architecture that this guy has built here. And that's something that Hartog had claimed earlier. And Fuentes now is telling Julie about this. You can see Peter out here having fun in his new place. When Thompson and crew get back together and they basically now are coming, you find out that Hartog actually hired Thompson to get rid of his kid and blame it on the nanny. So this whole thing actually is Hartog being the bad guy. Then you get them, they've like basically got their shit back together, and they figured out where the kid and Julie are going to go, so they're going to go get it. And you have this final fight scene again with these kind of hilarious, absurdist, disgusting bombastics. And again, you have this very deadpan way of rendering it by Tardi, but it still works very well. So here you have Thompson, who's been presented this absolutely brutal professional killer throughout the whole book. You see him get shot in the eye by this kid's like little play bow and arrow sticks here. But then still be badass enough to pull it out and keep shooting. But then you look at, like this panel here, that's not the most dynamic panel of a kid running away from a guy shooting at him with a gun. But this is also brutal. It doesn't matter. And the clip of it, it clips along at a really good pace. So it all works. It surprisingly works. I was noticing all throughout, especially in this final scene, is where I really started thinking Hugo Pratt pretty strong. And then right here, you have this character say, and the other one, who's he? Corto Maltese? Because he's wearing, Thompson is wearing the hat there. And so you get this direct shout out in the book, a call out to one of the big influences, obviously, on Jacques Tardi's art and career. And again, throughout this scene, you get a sense of those awesome backgrounds. You get here some more just like total savagery where he's shot her arm, and you can see it like twist her arm around with the action. The other thing is this Thompson character himself is an absolute beast of a man. He's had his foot blown off by a sawed-off shotgun, and he's still walking around on the stump of it. So he may be comically incompetent in this book, but he's a really intense character. And again, you can, if you've seen, like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels or Snatch, you're familiar with these type of characters. And I'm assuming here it's supposed to have a French setting, but basically the same vibes as that. And then here you just get some more really super intense art where this character's head, his head is blown off and his jaw is, blown to the side here, and just these really grotesque images. But again, they're small, they're quiet, there's not a lot of details to them, they're not bombastic compared to a lot of things that I have seen. And then here, it's not his child, it's his nephew, sorry. Hartog is his uncle. So here he's like saying, "Hey, Uncle Hartog." And then the kid throws an axe and hits him in the bridge of the nose with the axe, and then he falls and dies. So it all has this kind of like tragic comedy aspect to it, where the good guys do, sorry, spoiler alert, but the good guys do win in the end. The end is very, very abrupt. I think there could have been a little bit more like come off of the end, but it's not that type of story. It's just a story that starts out a little slow with the build, and then the action just gets more and more intense until everything's resolved, and it's immediately over. So it is a really, really fun book. I really enjoy Jacques Tardi's art. I have one or two more of his books, one more that I got in this Fanabucks sale. Looking forward to reading that. But if I enjoy that one as much as I enjoyed this one, then that will probably be next year on my list of things to do with the Fanabucks sale, is get me a lot more of the Jacques Tardi stuff. And if this has not been made into a movie, maybe it has been under a different title and I didn't know, or maybe it's a French movie or something, but this would make a hell of a movie. Hire Guy Ritchie. I will be there to watch that movie. So quite enjoyed it. If you haven't read this, read it yourself. If you are a fan of Jacques Tardi, I would love to know what's his best work. Where does this rank? Is this a middling one? Is this a great one? Is it a crappy one? That will help me as well determine how interested I am in the rest of his work. So I really appreciate that. If you enjoy what we're doing here on the channel and want to support us, there's two ways to do that. The first is through our Patreon. We have two different tiers of engagement on there. At the first tier, you just get early access to the videos. At the second tier, you get exclusive previews of the books that Sean and I are working on, our private projects, and you'll also be able to help control the story of our ongoing webcomic experiment, Prone Day, that is exclusive to the Patreon. Any of the money that we make with the Patreon just goes back into helping us buy the books that we review so we can keep this whole channel rolling and just put that money back into the community. So if you want to support Living the Line itself, the best thing to do is to support Living the Line Publishing and what Sean's doing with the publishing side. So we'll go ahead and take a look at one of his projects now. House on Fire by Matt Battaglia is a just gorgeous book where Matt's kind of making an emotional response to the years of COVID and wrapping that into a sci-fi dystopian future that really the sci-fi dystopian's backgrounded and you're focused on the emotional journey of two characters in a really beautiful way. And then that's enhanced by Matt's like really awesome, loose, kind of Paul Popish dry brush work. And then Sean and Matt have worked to get this second kind of orange spot color in there that's going to look really, really beautiful, and it has allowed Matt to use his dry brush technique to add tone to the thing too. So with Sean's production technique, this is going to be a gorgeous book with a lot of heart.
Like and subscribe and hit the bell, please, so Carson can finish reading his books and let me go home.